Turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Greetings, all you beautiful knuckle-dragging bipeds of vintage audio persuasion. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech. And here on the bench is obviously a partially disassembled Akai CSF12. That is Charlie Sierra Foxtrot 12. Okay, so what am I doing with this deck? Well, some basic servicing and a little beyond. So, with this deck, the problem was the typical stuff, a bogged down mechanism, and what was going on with that was the usual. There was a lot of dirt and debris that had accumulated over the decades, all common stuff, and some degraded lubricant, but also too, the belts were badly degraded to the point where they turned into the dreaded black goo. Okay, so before I get more into this video, I just want to mention that this is not for the purpose of getting into detailed how-to information or detailed tech tips. I will do videos where I go into a bit of that every now and then, but I'm selling this deck, so I want to make a video so that if somebody does end up buying this deck, I can pass a link on to them and they could have it as part of their record if they want. And just to see that, you know, I am actually working on it. So even though I'm not going over detailed information as far as showing every little thing I did, just the fact that, yeah, I am working on it. I have it disassembled and pulled apart. I'm in it. I already did the work that I already mentioned, you know, going in and peeling back some layers and cleaning it out and reapplying lubricant where need be and all that. And I'll get a little bit more into that in just a moment. But I don't have it disassembled here just for theatrics, obviously. So anyways, I think that's a good thing to do in this day and age because, as a lot of you know, you hear the horror stories when people buy audio gear off of the big auction site and other places. People claim that X amount of work was done and in fact it wasn't, or it wasn't done correctly, and so forth and so on. There's a lot of things floating around out there that you hear about, and also too, I don't want to make a blanket statement and say that all sellers do that, because there's good people out there, there's good sellers that do what they say they did, and as far as servicing and refurbishing some of the gear and all that. So anyways, but on an entry level piece of equipment like this, you know, I'm just going into the more critical aspects of servicing this deck and a little bit beyond, and I'll touch on that. But on that note though, I want to mention that I've acquired a lot of equipment over time, and just due to the very nature of the business I'm in, as a lot of you might imagine, people give me stuff and say, hey, you know what, I don't want this, I've had it stored away forever, I'll never use it, here you go, do what you want with it. Some people that bring stuff in for pricing, and you know, they want to know what it's going to take to work on it and so forth, and I give them an honest assessment and they say, nah, you know, I don't want to do that, I don't want to commit to that, I don't want to put that kind of money into this piece of equipment, just keep it. And I'm like, okay, well, are you sure? Okay, yeah, use it for parts, use it for whatever. So some of this stuff I do in fact designate as donor units, parts units, all the time. And I've acquired a lot of gear over time. I don't keep the gear here in the shop because I don't like to be tripping over stuff, so I keep it off site. But the point is that I'm starting to bring some stuff in that I want to start moving, and I want to thin out the herd, in other words, and let some people enjoy this stuff. And there you go. So some stuff that I think, at least I have the intention to repair and restore to varying degrees, depending on what's going on with it, depending on if it's worth it for me to do. As a lot of you know, I'm very, very busy, and I have to prioritize on the repair and restoration work that I do for customers, obviously. But I am going to start squeezing in a little bit more of this and just get some different levels of gear sold. Some entry-level stuff that doesn't need a lot of work, which is why I don't mind working on some of this entry-level stuff and putting it up for sale, because it doesn't need a lot of work to begin with. Like this deck doesn't need a lot of work, and I'll explain, you know, kind of what I did. But the moral of the story is, I will work on different pieces of gear to varying degrees, and I will be absolutely honest about what I did versus what I didn't do. And that's what separates guys like me from sellers that claim this has been done, that's been done, when it hasn't. One thing I want to mention too, I'm talking about selling this stuff. I'm not pitching the sale of this piece of gear or any piece of gear here on the YouTube channel, because I don't want to get into selling on the internet anyways. I don't want to start packaging stuff up and shipping stuff out and doing that song and dance over the internet. This is going to be displayed in a designated area in my shop that I'm going to display it in and hang a price tag on it. If people want it, fine. So yeah, the video, if somebody buys it, I'll send them the link if they want to have this as part of their record. So again, I just peeled back the layers just enough to gain access to getting things cleaned out. I got a little compressed air in there, blew some stuff out, did the quintessential song and dance with solvents and swabs to get out the stickier stuff, and reapplied lubricant where it needed to go, and check the various levers, make sure that the various levers and cams were moving about the way they're supposed to within their normal ranges of travel, and that nothing was excessively worn, it didn't look defective, wasn't bent out of position. There's more plastics on the backside, but I checked all that out. But you can see, the supply and take up and the plastics and the little gears. I make sure that the gear teeth are intact, that none of the plastics are cracked, because that is sometimes commonplace with these plastics. Over time they degrade, of course, they become brittle, they crack. Sometimes they even soften up and will kind of break away. Rubber obviously goes bad. As I mentioned, this deck had all those bouts that turned into black goo, a real mess, but the rubber on the idler tire is still good and it's doing its job. So I only did what had to be done, just the critical aspects of the function of this deck and a little bit beyond by going in, peeling back, cleaning stuff. This is a nice clean mechanism now. By the time I get the new belts on it, which I do have, I'm going to install them in just a little bit here. I believe the mechanism is going to be nice and reliable for a good period of time, unless something goes wrong with one of the plastic parts or something, which I have no way of guaranteeing. I have no way of knowing. I mean, it's decades old plastic. You never know. But otherwise, everything is looking pretty good. And so there you go there. And the electronics, every time I pop the hood on anything, I go through, as a lot of you know, with a magnifier and really study the board, look for obvious things and the not so obvious, but obviously I look for stressed components right off the bat, things that look discolored, overheated, in other words, things that look crispy. Sometimes components are even cracking, electrolytic caps that are bulging, maybe starting to leak their contents. Things like that, connectors, the condition of connectors, the pins and sockets, make sure everything is clean, that the connectors the plastic connectors aren't cracking, the wiring looks good, wiring looks like it's intact, the boards look okay, there's no cracks on the boards, solder joints look good, traces look good, as far as what I can see anyways. And I at least go through and do that under a little bit of magnification there. And with the time that I have to work within a piece of equipment, based on what I'm realistically going to put into like an entry-level piece of equipment. But I will certainly not send something out the door that's absolute crap. So it's going to be working, and it's going to be gone through pretty good based on the signs and symptoms that it's exhibiting and what really needs to be done. Again, the more critical functions. And on that note, with electronics, I'm going to go through and check all the switches out real good and clean them out, and make sure the tactile switches are working okay. As you can see, there's not mechanical switches or controls here. It's tactile switches, solenoids, and all that. So anyways, sometimes when you get a tactile switch, by the way, that's a little bit funky, a little bit intermittent, but otherwise the contacts are good. It's not worn excessively past the point of no return. Sometimes you can get a little bit of solvent, like in an applicator like this, a little needle applicator, or whatever the case, and just carefully just start dripping onto the switch while you're working the switch, the button on the switch, and the fluid will oftentimes permeate inside the switch pretty good and will work its way in and help to freshen up the contacts a bit and get it working. I've had good success with that, but again, if that doesn't hold up, or if it's just non-responsive to trying to clean it like that, obviously tactile switches are a dime a dozen. Pull it out, put a new one in. I have them here in the shop if I need to. I just don't want to put any more into this deck than need be if the tactile switches are functioning. I'm not just going to go through and just wholesale replace them or shotgun replace them. So, because this isn't a restoration, I'm not going into that. I'm not going to recap this unit, unless when I power it up, if I find there's a bad cap or something, yeah, I'll replace it. But I don't want to put too much into it. If it's working and it's working well, and I test it for a time and it's doing good in the shop, then I'll give it the green light, the thumbs up, and it can go out the door, and I'm sure it will provide good service to somebody for probably years to come. I can't guarantee that a component won't fail in here because these components are decades old. It's a large population of decades old components, so that's the reality of things. So, but I will assure everything I can within my power that, I've freshened things up, handled the critical aspects of servicing, went in and reassured, a potential buyer that, the switches are all functioning, the pots are working good, I've cleaned everything out, the mechanism is functioning well, I've tested it out, put a tape in it, it's playing at the correct speed, it's not eating tapes, it's doing good, it's doing what it should be doing, and I've had it here in the shop, playing my tapes for a while, sitting in here rocking out, enjoying the deck for a while before I put it up for sale. So that's what I wanted to cover in this video. So I'll be back in just a moment to do some testing, and we'll go from there. Okay, so before I get to the function testing and the audio test that I mentioned a moment ago, I decided to divert and talk a little bit about what I'm doing right now and just kind of show you guys the lay of the land, especially for a prospective buyer. Here's the backside of the mechanism. Anyways, the belts are installed. That's the main thing that I wanted to show. The new belts are on board. Everything's looking good. Let me just spin this around here and I'll show you the belt on the front side there. That's the counter belt that is attached to the take-up pulley there. The take-up pulley, all right. And it ends over here at the counter. So it's mostly reassembled. There's a few other little things I have to get back on, like the plate here that goes on the front. No big deal. Anyways, but everything's looking good. Everything's clean. And let me zoom in just a little bit. You can see the power supply section there and the pretty little transformer. That's a cool looking transformer. It looks like it's made out of marble, and it has that marble grain to it, as you can probably see on the side there a little bit better, being that the light's not kind of blowing it out. But yeah, it looks like it's made out of marble. It's a pretty transformer. So anyways, there you go. So everything's nice and clean in here. Got the wires reorganized, wire tied, and everything's looking good. As I already mentioned, I went through earlier with my magnifier and was kind of checking the various components, making sure that everything was looking good physically, as I already mentioned. Let me reposition the light a little bit. Let me back out just a bit once again. So I'm in the phase right now where I'm servicing the controls. And I'll mention in just a moment why I have cotton stuff between those switches. Some of you probably already have that all figured out. But anyways, so I'm servicing the controls and cleaning the various inputs and outputs, which is why down here I have some pipe cleaners and my brush and all that. I just saturate them with some contact cleaner, go in there and scrub the various input jacks and all that. Just get everything squared away. That's what I'm doing right now. But I wanted to talk on something real quick because of a statement or something I was talking about earlier. I made a statement about various sellers, and whether on the big auction site or wherever, that sometimes claim to perform service that sometimes isn't actually performed, okay, because of dishonesty and all that stuff. The reason I bring this up again is because the service they claim to perform is service that can be rather difficult in some pieces of equipment as opposed to others. And where I'm getting at is this. So in here, everything was pretty straightforward as far as the servicing of controls. Like with this potentiometer here, access into it is right here, okay? And I'm going to come full circle with this, and you're going to see why I'm explaining this, because this is not going to be getting into how to clean potentiometers and all that. I've covered that before, and I'll cover it again in later videos. Every once in a while I kind of refresh that topic. But so you spray your cleaner down into there, exercise your control, you're off to the races, all that good stuff, depending on how thorough of a job you do. So anyways, so I sprayed it out a couple times. I'm just waiting for it to dry out. Then I'm going to apply a drop or two of some fader lubricant, work it in there, blah, 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 so forth and so on. So this control was fairly easy to get to because after removing the nut on the front, I just pulled this control out because it was otherwise just floating, okay? It has its own little piece of board here that the leads on the bottom of the pot, you can see those leads down there, are soldered to along with these wires, okay? However, the other control that's hiding behind the, let me back out just a little bit and maybe get the light down there, that's hiding behind this piece of cotton here, okay? You see that, what I'm pointing to? That's another potentiometer for the, record balance and all that. That's the same exact pot as what I just showed you, the one that was easy to gain access to, that has its own little piece of circuit board. Once again, okay, you can see that the leads are soldered to and the wires and all that. But this potentiometer here, its leads are soldered directly to this main board here. And in order to gain access to the opening of that potentiometer, unfortunately that opening is on the facing the circuit board, okay? And that doesn't mean that I wasn't able to get to it, and in fact I did. I flushed it out multiple times. This one's done already, but I'll show you again on this pot here, and I'm going to come full circle. There's a point to what I'm talking about here. So this is a part here that would be soldered to the main circuit board, okay, where my fingers are. If my fingers were the main circuit board, boom, the pot would be soldered onto there. And then you can see, here's our opening here. So the way it's positioned, it's a little bit difficult to get contact cleaner down in there on that other potentiometer. But I did because of the fact that I have a straw that has this curved application needle attached to it. So I was able to kind of reach under there and get the curved needle around the underside there and blast away and get the contact cleaner down in there. And I had to kind of reposition the deck a little bit so that gravity was in my favor, kind of, tilt it downward, and I had a block set up so it was kind of tilted. Getting to that, if I had to, for example, if I had to service that pot and remove it, it would be difficult to do because I would have to lift this main board enough. I'd have to, get all this disassembled once again, pull that out, and lift the board enough to be able to get to the underside to desolder it and remove it, because you'll notice the bottom here is just all one piece. You can't pull the bottom off and then have access to the bottom of the circuit board without removing the circuit board itself. There's some screws on the circuit board that you have to loosen up, and there's a lot involved in lifting that circuit board, just put it that way. And why am I explaining all this? Well, because when people make claims that they serviced the controls, something has been restored, in some receivers and some amps, and some of you know this, it's very difficult to get to the controls. And control servicing, in the mind of a lot of people, is basic stuff. Oh yeah, deoxying the controls. In some equipment, it is pretty basic. If the controls only need that level of servicing, just a few blasts of deoxit or whatever contact cleaner you're using, then yes, you remove the cover and access into all of the controls is right there. But in some cases, controls are very difficult to get to. There's a lot of disassembly involved, including removing the front panel, the cover, the front chassis portion needs to be pulled out. There's circuit boards that need to be pulled back, and there's the potentiometers, the controls on those boards. Sometimes you can get to them good, but sometimes the openings are facing the circuit board, and it's best, even though you can reach underneath with a curved applicator. If you have the right applicator, you can reach under there and spray away and get contact cleaner in there, whatnot, and even some lubricant after the fact. But sometimes if you really need to do a very thorough job, and it's best to be able to remove the control from the board, desolder it so you can hold it, blast it, position it for drainage, all that stuff. I've explained this before. And sometimes when a control doesn't respond favorably to a flush type of cleaning, well, then you need to remove it anyways to disassemble it if it is even the type that you can disassemble without potentially causing damage, or it's just to the point where it's not worth it and it's better to replace the control. So anyways, the point is that it's not always straightforward. Sometimes there's a lot more involved than people think. So when somebody is selling a piece of equipment, you have to wonder sometimes if they did the level of servicing to the controls that they claim they did. Now, some people do, but sometimes because some controls are hard to get to, you find that they'll go in there with some contact cleaner, and sometimes it has some lubricant in it, and they can kind of see the controls a little bit, but because access is so limited, they'll just spray the heck out of everything. They'll blast the controls, what they could see of them, blast away and spray, hoping that some of the contact cleaner gets in there, and it ends up making a mess all over the boards. And it has kind of an oily substance in it because it has lubricant in it, and that's not good at all to do to the boards, and it gets all over the place, so forth and so on. I'm bringing this up because when you're buying equipment, be aware of that. If it's somebody that isn't proficient at servicing equipment, and or they just don't want to go through all the work it actually takes to do properly, then you might get a situation where they either don't do it or they just spray all over the place, trying to spray and pray, hoping that they get some cleaner in there, and that's not the case. So that's why in a lot of equipment that I service that has very difficult access to controls, that's why it's not cheap to do. That's why professional level servicing of controls can get a bit more costly because of all the disassembly involved, gaining access, thorough flushing of controls, exercising the heck out of them, depending on the control's condition. And again, I don't want to go too deep into that, but it's part of driving home the point that you got to be aware of that, because sometimes what people claim is not what you're actually getting. So there you go. So now I'm going to get to the function testing and whatnot and go from there. So I diverted, but for some of you that are into this, that might have been information that was good for you to know. So anyways, let's get to the function testing and what have you. Okay, so here's the deck put back together minus the cover. And I'm leaving that off because I still have one more thing I have to do. It turns out that there's a problem with that record level potentiometer. I already opened it up and tried to repair it, but no can do, or at least I don't want to put that much time into it. I tried to repair it once, put it back together, and what's going on with it, one set of contacts for the right channel are a bit fickle. And I was in there tweaking around with the spring contacts, and I put it back together. It worked for a little while, and now it's crapping out again. So the right channel is intermittent when I'm trying to adjust the record level, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. I have a 400 hertz tone piped in that I recorded. And everything records fine. The record function is working fine, but just that record level control is fickle. And I will demonstrate it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on the meter there, and you'll see that when the tone starts, you're going to see both channels coming through just fine, and then you're going to see one dropping out and coming back, dropping out. And when it's dropping out, what I was doing is kind of manipulating the record level pot. I was kind of moving it around, and it would pop in and out. So I ordered a new potentiometer, and that's why I'm just going to leave the cover off, but everything else is working perfect. I'll go into a quick audio demo in a minute, but let me just play back the tone and kind of show you the problem that I'm referring to that's going to be resolved when I get the new potentiometer. Alright, so let me start her up. Okay, so you get the point. So let me go ahead and demo some tunes. Okay, I have a commercially recorded tape on board, and let me just state my disclaimer that by no means do I own or have any rights to the music. I'm not here to exploit anybody's music. I'm just doing this for test purposes. So I'm not going to camp out on the tape too long. I'm just going to play quick clips, just so you all get the point, again, for testing purposes and to demo the functions. Other than that, yeah, good to go. The only other thing I want to say is, once again, the record function works just fine on this. The reason I discovered that issue with the record level pot is I was testing it with a mic first. So the mic left, mic right inputs worked just fine. I had a stereo mic plugged into that, and when I was testing, doing some voice tests, I discovered that that channel was intermittent, and when I would mess around with the pot, it would come in and out and all that. So whatever. So I decided to just pipe in a tone in the back and mess with it some more, diagnose the problem, and I did. I found out it was the pot and the contacts, the internal contacts, so I already explained that. I'm just waiting, again, for the pot to get here. I ordered it, and when that gets here, that'll solve the problem. In other words, it's nothing else. It's isolated to the pot. I already went through the diagnostics and everything. So that's that. Also, too, the headphone jack is working. All the inputs are working. That's kind of the point of what I'm trying to say here. I tested the headphone jacks with my good old Pioneer SE205s. Everything sounds really nice. So let me get to the tunes here, and I'll demo the basic functions. So let's have at it. Okay, rewind. And all those tactile switches are working just fine, obviously. It's rewinding nice and fast. The rewind and fast forward are are nice and speedy. So again, with the mechanism all cleaned up. Okay, fast forward. With the mechanism all cleaned up, you know, and everything re-lubed and all that, yeah, everything is moving along just fine. So, excellent. All right, let me do a little play again. Okay, eject. Okay, the eject is nice. Everything is nice and smooth. All right, cool. All right, so again, just waiting for the pot to get here, and then the cover will go back on once I get that new pot installed, and everything will be functioning on this just nice. So that's about it. As I always say, guys, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care.
This is a poor man's shoe production.